Duh. Subscribe to the channel. The light shone through a terrible storm and a shuddering frost, almost losing consciousness from the cold and severe pain. Everything around was so foggy that it was not visible the bottom. The woman left the bus a couple of stops earlier, wanted to run to the supermarket and buy something for dinner. She did not understand when the blizzard began. At first it seemed to be just a dust, but with every minute the gusts of wind were even stronger. Everything around was spinning and snowing, which poured down the wall. Sveta barely moved her feet and scolded herself for what Sveta was standing on. Stupid idiot. The baby will be born in 2 weeks, and you drag me to the cemetery in such weather? Vididi? I won't make it. Oh, Mom, how painful it is. Oh. As a result, her stomach and back began to hurt like hell. It looks like the fights began. I just didn't have enough of this now. With anxiety, she thought. The woman was looking in her pockets for her phone to call an ambulance and didn't find it. Did she forget it at home? She was completely brainless. Her stomach was hurting more and more. She couldn't go any further. And her hands and feet were freezing. Sveta tried to ask the help of the passers-by, but it was already dark outside, and those rare people who came across her on the way pretended not to hear her and hurried away on their business. The woman was in a lot of pain, and with difficulty climbing onto the porch of the first entrance, she started to chaotically dial the numbers. She got into one apartment, then another. She begged and literally screamed from the last of her strength. Help! Call an ambulance! Open the door, please, I feel sick. I'm giving birth. In one of the apartments, the man really answered at first. I'll open it now, wait. But then the source of the cry of his wife was heard. We don't have many problems in life. Normal people are sitting at home in this weather, especially pregnant. Let someone else carry her. She's obviously a lowborn or a. The legs were coughing and couldn't hold it, and the woman in despair for the last time dialed number. She whispered with her dry lips, I beg you, open the door, I'm dying. She didn't hope that someone would call her back, just sat on the porch, unable to hold on to her feet, and prepared to die for a long time and painfully. Suddenly a miracle happened, and a dry, gray, old man came out on the threshold. And under her there is only a light shirt. Seeing a pregnant woman in a thin coat and slender boots, clearly not intended for such weather, he gasped and threw himself at her. Woman, what's wrong with you? I'll call an ambulance now. Come on, I'll help you get to the entrance. And then you can get a cold. Who walks in such a cold in your position? Here are the young people. What are they thinking about? Sveta didn't have time to answer anything at all, just looked at her savior with tears of gratitude, and again screamed from the strongest painful fight and lost consciousness. Fyodor Ivanovich immediately assessed the situation as critical. The woman was clearly giving birth to everything. He called an ambulance, although he understood that on such a blizzard and unpaved roads she would have to drive for a very long time. The man explained to the dispatcher who was giving birth for a long time, and why it happens in his apartment. But you can't slow down. Then he began to drag the woman to his apartment. Fortunately, it was the first floor. He laid down a blanket on the floor right in the hallway, laid down the rosary, and began to bring it to her nose on the chateau, trying to bring it to her senses. Finally, she came to her senses and immediately read out, Thank you, you won't think, I'm not a beggar and not a beggar. I just decided to visit the late groom at the cemetery today. It's his birthday today, you know, but I couldn't help it. My legs were broken. I even forgot my phone at home. I know I'm stupid, and I shouldn't have left home in such weather. My name is Sveta. Actually, I have to give birth early. The deadline is in 2 weeks. But suddenly something pressed me so hard. Oh, again. Mom, it hurts so much. What to do? Did you call the ambulance? And she twisted again, biting her lips and trying to endure the burning pain. The man ran to look for the alcohol, but he just didn't. He put it in a basin of warm water and ordered, So, Sveta, listen to me carefully. My name is Fyodor Ivanovich. I called the ambulance, but they noticed that it will probably be dragged for about an hour. And you have more and more fights. By all signs, it means that you are giving full force. Don't ask anything. Trust me and do what I say. When the fight begins, you must breathe with your nose, as I command, and tense up, okay? I'll work my hands and look where the child's head is, okay? Don't be afraid. I won't do you any harm. On the contrary, I want to help you give birth to a healthy baby. Try to help me too. Are you pregnant? Were you on the report? Is the breast position right? It's important. Try to remember. And don't panic. We don't need hysterics. So, it started. Repeat after me. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Sveta wanted to say that she was scared, and she didn't know this man at all, and that anything could happen now. But the fights became more frequent and more painful. She stopped understanding anything at all. She was covered in cold sweat and, as in the fog, tried to follow the command of the man. And he acted like a real professional, skillful, and clearly adopted the genes. And in half an hour, a charming baby appeared in the light. The weak but happy Light watched as Fedor Ivanovich gently washed him, clapped his butt. The boy immediately screamed, so loud and prudently that it even covered his ears. The man skillfully sawed the baby and gave him to Sveta. Try to feed him. Don't be shy. You may not have milk yet, but it is very important that it appears. Sveta was crying out of happiness, obediently doing everything. Son was really laughing, wetting his lips and trying to suck. Then finally the ambulance arrived. Young Felsher apologized for so long. They were already barely getting to the outskirts of the city. He was just amazed when he found out that an ordinary pensioner had taken birth so professionally. Moreover, not in the conditions of the maternity ward, where everything is necessary, but at home and without anything. Not every. He started to shake his hand. I was just shocked. You are a real hero. You saved a woman in the frost, and you even took her home. You should be written in the newspaper. I can't believe you are not connected with medicine. Fyodor Ivanovich blushed. He was pleased with this compliment and just waved his hand. Yes, it's a long story. I don't want to tell the past. I'm a regular guard in the supermarket. That's all. To move the... He still remembers you, Yagoza. You were so kind, guard. Where did you disappear so suddenly? What a meeting. So you can accept the family, respect you, and honor. The man was even more stunned. Oh, come on. It's all about me, about me. Sveta, you better help. Otherwise, to be honest, I was the first to accept the family in my life. You know what? With a fright, I remembered everything that was taught at the university once. Let her gynecologist examine her. But thank you for the warm words. I am very pleased. The woman and the baby were taken to the maternity hospital. She firmly squeezed his dry little palm and whispered with gratitude at the farewell. Thank you. You are my guardian angel, my savior. I will call my son in honor of you, Fedya. If it were not for your kind heart, I would have frozen in the frost. I thought there were no such responsive people left. Sorry that it fell on your head like snow. So much trouble because of me. Fyodor Ivanovich suddenly worried. Listen, I'm a fool. Tell me at least the last name. You need to bring everything you need to the hospital. How will you be there without anything? Sveta tormented. My last name is Osipova. Here are the keys to my room in the dormitory. There is a big bag. Everything is collected in it, both for me and for the child. Bring it to me if it's not difficult tomorrow. Once again, thank you for everything. And she dictated her address, explaining how to get through. Then she gently pressed her son, and she was taken to the maternity hospital. And Fyodor Ivanovich cleaned up everything in the apartment and began to sort out his past. So he became bitter. His heart was in pain. Some 10 years ago, Fyodor Ivanovich Zvankov was a famous cardiologist. He operated in the most prestigious clinic in the capital, had a wife Lena and a son Vanechka. His wife worked with him in the anesthesiology department, and everyone loved her and respected her for her professionalism. They met many years ago, still being students of the medical university, and never parted again. Fedya couldn't make beautiful confessions. He was generally a very modest and shy young man. Although he fell in love with Lena, a funny little girl and a jolly little girl from a parallel stream at once. He was mulling over her smile, laugh, look in the eyes of Carrie. He silently and prudently looked at her from under her forehead. And then he couldn't stand it, waited for the note after the lecture, just took it in his hand, put it in his bag and said, as he wanted, Lena, I love you. Will you come with me? The girl was in a hurry and asked again where I would go. It's a joke. But Fedor answered more seriously. Will you go to the school? We will give the application right tomorrow. We have a couple of months left before the diploma. I'm already working. You will not disappear with me. Do you believe? And he looked at her so much that she took him like this and believed. They went straight to her and got engaged, and never again parted. They lived with their souls and did not even quarrel. When Vanka was born, their happiness was simply limitless because he was a late and very beloved child of theirs. The boy grew in love and wealth, studied in a private prestigious school, and gave great hopes. It seemed that life had long been in place. Everything was going as it should, in its turn. That fatal, most black day in the life of Fedor Ivanovich literally overshadowed his entire fate. He got sick. He turned into a worm. The whole family was resting in the outskirts of the sanatorium. They often went there. Fedor Ivanovich and his son loved fishing on the lake in silence, and Lena was happy to swim and sunbathe. And it was necessary for this to happen. That on that very day, he was called to work. They brought the most difficult patient. He had to be saved. His relatives understood everything and let him go with a light heart. But they thought that tomorrow he would come back to them. But at midnight, they told Fedor Ivanovich a terrible news. It was in their house that the wiring was closed, and his wife and son died in the fire. This is an incredibly terrible and monstrous death. Colleagues helped Fedor bury his loved ones. He was absolutely irreplaceable and refused to believe that Lena and Vanya were no more. He even said at the farewell ceremony, "No, this is not Lena. Are you kidding me? And Vanya? Could this imaginary body be my son? This is just a mistake." At first, the employees pitied him, gave him a vacation so that he could come to his senses. It was clear that he simply could not operate in such a state, and very early. Fyodor Ivanovich continued to get up early in the morning, to cook oatmeal for breakfast, pancakes, and sandwiches with ham for Vanya. He talked to them as if they were there. Then he went to warm up the car, telling Lyosha and his neighbor that he was already late for work, and that he still needed to take his wife to the store and his son to the university. Then the neighbor, unable to stand this picture, finally told the surgeon that his wife and son were gone. Not at all, and they will never come back. After this, they drank a bottle of alcohol, and after that, Fyodor Ivanovich could not stop. Only after drinking to the last drop, he could forget for several hours in a sleep. And when he woke up, he ran to the supermarket again to drink and drown out the terrible pain that was killing him. The longing for his wife and son was so strong that he was ready to dig a grave and lie down next to it, to die, just to be there, in that world with his own. So the once famous cardiologist unnoticeably rolled to the bottom. There was no one to help, support, put up a friendly shoulder. He calculated himself from work. First, his hands shook, and secondly, he simply could not physically bear the false, sympathizing looks and judgment. He left a year ago, and also suddenly one day as he began. In a drunken hangover, Fedor Ivanovich had a strange dream. Lenotchka looked at him strictly, for some reason held his hand, very small Vanechka, and read him as a schoolboy. "What are you doing, Fedya? I'm not married for such a weakling. Stop it immediately. Who do you look like? A lost bum, God forbid. And remember, you have to live for someone. You just don't know about it yet." Vanya was crying and asking at the same time, "Dad, don't drink, please, I'm begging you, don't." The man woke up in a cold sweat and jumped on the bed like a sprain. A terrible cough was taken off by hand. Suddenly his head became clear, and for the first time after his wife's death, he looked around. What he saw shocked him. He's already got to the crystal service for a drunk case. Not an apartment, but a pigsty. After all, everything shone and shone here with Lenotchka. How did he get to such a life? It's incomprehensible. He looked at himself in the mirror with a shudder and even shook off. From there, an old alcoholic with bags under his eyes and wrinkles looked at him. Where was the old man going? He crossed himself and, raising his head, whispered up, "Thank you, dear, I understood everything. No more drops." From that day on, Fedor no longer drank a gram of alcohol. The neighbor, with whom he started his drink, was shocked. How so? This is the power of will. The next morning, Fedor was in the bathroom. He and Fyodor Ivanovich began to disassemble the blockages and put the apartment in order. It took almost 3 weeks of titanic labor. He took out a mountain of empty bottles and sent them to the glass jar reception point. He washed the premises for a long time and cleaned them there. Finally, when everything shone as before in the life of his wife, he calmed down. Then the man took care of himself. He bought new clothes, cut himself, shaved himself, and even got a job. Supermarket as a guard. He worked hard, didn't get lazy, his colleagues respected him. And in order not to go crazy on weekends from boredom and loneliness, he brought a kitten for himself. He called him a black cat. The pet was just a charm. He was black, and on his neck it was as if someone had tied a white tie. Before that, he was cute. The man loved to sit in a chair, to sleep, and to stroke the pet with a silky, pleasant fur. His peaceful grumbling calmed and somehow pacified Fyodor Ivanovich. That's how he lived, almost a prison guard in his apartment. The man had no hope for anything. He just lived his life. His health was very bad. He was put in a polyclinic for an incurable diagnosis, and Fyodor Ivanovich hoped that he would finally meet his wife and son in the afterlife. But today's events suddenly broke into his boring, lonely life and turned everything in it. After they took Sveta to the maternity hospital, Fyodor Ivanovich got up early and rushed to her dorm to take a bag with things for her and the baby. At the entrance, Snug smelled terrible alcohol, cigarettes, and fried cheap fish. Seeing his unpleasant appearance, the elderly woman, who clearly had traces of a turbulent life on her face, noticed them. But wow, our orphan has already turned to the old men, or her father has found himself. And she laughed loudly and wryly. The pensioner looked at her with a wry look. You should be ashamed. The light is in the maternity hospital, so she asked to give her the bag. Is it possible about people? You are a woman too. The neighbor suddenly became serious. Oh, sorry. I didn't know. I was just joking. Something is a bit early, I guess. Wait here, give it to her from me. And she put 2 apples in the old man's mouth. And tell the athlete she will understand. In fact, Svetka is a good woman, but not a lucky one. Although there are no particularly lucky ones living here. You know, when he entered the poor room and looked around, he just got terrified. From old windows, the poor woman was blowing, despite the fact that the woman was. All the things and books are arranged in places. The pensioner ran around and examined the bag. There was also not much. Everything is only the most necessary for the baby, and then clearly sewn by itself. In the middle of the table, in the black frame, there was a portrait of a young, handsome guy. There was a glass of vodka and black bread on top of it. It turns out that just recently in the life of this poor woman, some tragedy also happened. She said something about why she was at the cemetery. Closing the door to the key, the pensioner decidedly went to the store and bought a pair of and a new winter jacket for her and a suit for newborns of beautiful blue color. He asked his nurse to give her a chocolate bar, and she let him into the tent for a short while, especially since she was alone there. The woman was very pleased with the visit of the old man and began to hug him, as if he knew a friend or close relative. Hello, Fyodor Ivanovich. Thank you for everything again. Oh, how good that you came. I'm really bored with Videnka. He's so calm. He eats on time. He's a miracle, not a child. The man felt bad. Did she really call him son of Fedor? She respected the old man. Very nice. Let me look at the boy. Oh, so cute, so handsome. How are you? How is your health? Are you going home soon? Sveta was terrified. Everything is fine. The doctor said that the baby was taken by a real professional. He scolded me for being careless. I really fooled her. She ran away. She is called to the cemetery. Yes, in this position. I just feel so bad and sick without Oleg. My heart is breaking for him. I would live there in this cemetery, only if I were next to him. And she suddenly wept so childishly. Tears rolled down her cheeks with large drops. She was shaking her thin body. Fyodor Ivanovich felt unbearably sorry for her. He sat on the edge of her bed and carefully took her hand and began to condemn. I understand you, daughter. Like no one, believe me. I lost my wife and son. I drank a lot, rolled to the very bottom. I barely managed to get out. I know how it hurts and aches inside. I want to go out and scream, beat the walls with fists, and pray that the heavens are what I've been suffering for all these years. You won't wish for the enemy. They locked me in the warehouse, they teased me, and they didn't finish eating. So many years have passed, and I haven't eaten all the bread. As I see someone throwing it in the garbage bin, my heart is covered with blood. At the end, they gave me this very poor room. I didn't have any relatives. They knew I wouldn't go to complain, and who would listen to the orphan? I tried to at least cover the floor with wallpaper. But you saw it yourself. They need a major renovation. And I'm not even talking about the places of common use. It's a terrible sight. And look, the ceiling will fall on my head. I went to school on a sewing machine, finished school with a difference. I was already working then. I took small orders from people at home. The neighbors and the classmates helped me all over the world. They got together and bought a sewing machine for my birthday. That's how I met my Oleg. He brought me pants to sew on. We talked word for word, liked each other, met. My fiancé worked as a high-ranking employee. He was paid well, so we rented an apartment. He didn't agree to live in my apartment. There are no human conditions. Everything was so wonderful. We loved each other without any memory. Although both were fiery, they were memorable. We hugged and kissed right away, and there was no offense, and disappeared. What poems did he write to me? He'll get up at night while I'm sleeping, write and put it on the pillow in the morning so that I can read it. It was so nice. The statements were sent to the registry office. Olzhek was also completely alone. His grandmother brought him up. She died a long time ago. We decided not to celebrate the wedding, just to sign a modest divorce. And then I got sick in the morning. I went to the doctor and found out that I was pregnant. I was very worried. How can I say no? We didn't discuss this issue yet. We thought about living for ourselves for a while, and then have children. But Oleg was so happy, he really wanted a baby. We started to save every penny to save money for the birth, the wheelchair, and the good bed. But my husband was hungry. He bought bananas and oranges. Nobody ever cared about me as much as he did. He was worried if I was eating well, and if the baby was getting vitamins. And that day, I was sewing a dress for one of the customers when the phone rang. When I was told that Oleg was no longer there, I just couldn't believe it. How was it not there? There was a man, and he was gone? And it turns out that an extraordinary incident happened on the building. Oleg broke down from the TH floor. That's how my life ended. Completely. All the money went to the funeral. I led the bride on the last path, as it should. And then the devastating hell began. I had no money to pay for the apartment. I had to move to my room. It's cold there. I had to put on 3 socks. Hands go down, I thought and cried. Who needs my baby now? Oleg is no more. He will never see his son. He will not be able to love and grow him. Will I be able to raise a child on my own? And my heart just burst into love. I can't forget him. I miss him. It's scary. Finally, my soul became warm. I feed him, and it's good, my little lump of happiness. But still, it's very scary to be alone with a child. Sometimes the panic starts, to be honest. I can't even take care of him. What do we learn in the orphanage? Fyodor listened with tears in his eyes to the confession of this poor woman, and almost cried himself. Their state after the death of close people is so similar to that of the poor woman. But he, an adult who had been in the profession of a man, took it and broke. And this young woman, who was left alone with black grief, took this battle, did not let go of her hand. He was upset and decidedly said, "You know, Sveta, I have a proposal for you. After the discharge, I will take you and the baby to my place. But what do you have to do in the fridge? Think for yourself. How and where can I buy a child?" Through the... Oh, thank you, Fyodor Ivanovich. I'm terribly sorry that I fell on your head with my problems, but I will probably accept your offer and live at least for the first time. Otherwise, I really worry about my son. He definitely doesn't like life there. I was ill 3 times. I don't know how to thank you. You're just a golden man. After the man left, Sveta began to unpack the bag and almost didn't open it again. There was so much stuff needed there. Fyodor Ivanovich bought it. What a good boy. After all, she is essentially a completely alien person. What is she so concerned about? For her, who grew up in an orphanage and never knew warmth or affection, Such a manifestation of simple human participation in her destiny was so wildly. And even if she did not understand the motives of such a nobility, she was very pleased. That's how everyone began to live together. Sveta, Fedia Malinki, Fyodor Ivanovich, and Kot Chernish. At first, the woman was embarrassed and awkward. She asked every time if she could take one or another, but soon everything went in its right direction. She became so comfortable in this hospitable apartment. It seemed that they had known each other for years. He was happy to help her with the baby. He taught her a lot as a doctor. Sveta fed the old man with delicious borscht and cutlets. And sometimes the cat liked to lie down at the baby's feet and purr and yowl at him. But she was very worried that her savior very often had a severe headache. She measured a slightly increased pressure, but not critical for his age. The woman often secretly watched as he tried not to show how painful it was to her, pressing her fists so that the knuckles of her fingers were whitened. She drinks the strongest painless drink. But when she tried to ask Fyodor Ivanovich directly what was wrong with him, or suggested going to the doctor, he just waved his hand. Don't take the bad things into your head. It's all nonsense. At my age, if you wake up and nothing hurts, it means you're already dead. It's all a change of weather. But the woman understood. He just distracts attention. In fact, he doesn't want to tell the truth. She hoped that he would open up himself and tell everything. She didn't want to force a person into the soul. One day, Sveta started to clean up, and Fyodor Ivanovich, to keep him from getting in the way, called to go for a walk with Fedia the younger. He called him a gentle grandson. When the man came back in an hour and a half, Sveta was amazed by the portrait. She asked, surprised, "Where did you get this photo?" "I know this guy. Is he your relative?" Fyodor Ivanovich almost cried. "What a nice one. This is my son, Vinechka. I took all his photos and his wife's photos to the storage room. I can't watch it without tears. My heart hurts. How much time has passed, and I blame myself for that fire. That I left, I wasn't there. Maybe everything would have been different, and I could have saved my family. Or I would have burned with them together. We would have been in heaven together. But May is alone here." The light waved its hands. "It can't be. This is Dennis, a friend of my late fiancé. He is a paratrooper. They served together. He was at the funeral. And before that he came to visit us sometimes. I haven't come out of my mind yet. How is this possible? I don't understand anything." The old man thought hard, remembering something, and then said, "You know, Sveta, actually my wife gave birth to twins. But when she came to her senses after the most difficult births, she was informed of a terrible news. That one of the babies was born dead. We were, of course, sad. We buried the baby in the cemetery. Everything was as it should be. There could be no mistakes. I was personally engaged in funerals. My wife just couldn't. She was crying. Even the milk on her nervous soil disappeared. I had to feed Vanya with mixtures. I want to find this Dennis. You say you have his photo? Will you show it tomorrow? Do you know where he lives?" Sveta enthusiastically helped Fyodor Ivanovich. This mystery did not give her peace. She wanted to find out as soon as possible how it is possible that two completely strangers to each other were like two drops of water. After all, such miracles simply do not happen. The woman went home and brought the same photo where Dennis, her late fiancé, Oleg, was depicted. The old man looked at him for a long time, compared him to a portrait of his son, and was amazed. "You are right. Just like a copy. I thought you were exaggerating. Do I really look like him? I've never met someone like that. How can we find out where he lives? I can't wait to talk to him and find out everything. Who is he? What family he grew up in?" Sveta found out about Dennis' phone number through common acquaintances. After all, he lived in their city. The next day, she called him and asked him to meet. He knew Sveta because they were Oleg's best army friends, and of course agreed to come. He thought maybe the woman needed some help and couldn't help himself. When Dennis came to the address indicated by Sveta, he was quite surprised when he saw a woman with a baby on her hands and an old man. "Hele, Sveta. Oh, is this your Karaputso? Sorry, I didn't know you were pregnant when Oleg died. Is this Oleg's son?" The woman tried to explain everything. "Hello, Dennis. Yes, this is Fedia, Oleg's son, you're right. But then the deadline was still very short, and I didn't have time for that. I still lost my beloved person. I barely managed to get out of it. So few people know about it. But it's not. About my son, get to know each other. This is Fedor Ivanovich. He is a famous surgeon in the past, a very good person. Now he will tell you why he wanted to see you. Dennis was confused. Good afternoon. I am Dennis. Nice to meet you. Just don't remember, even if you kill me. Are we friends? The old man waved his hands. No, Dennis, we are not friends personally. But it so happened that Sveta saw a photo of my late son, Vanya, and began to claim that this is not Vanya at all, but her friend Dennis. Look for yourself. What do you say? The young man could not understand anything yet, but when he looked at the portrait, he died right away. He looked at him himself, out of the blue. Only the hairstyle is different. The hair is longer, the hair is long, and the face is the same. He didn't understand anything and started talking about himself. I don't know how that is possible. My mother raised me alone, without a father. However, in another city, km from here, I was definitely not a foster child. I saw the birth certificate 100 times. However, we didn't have a father or other relatives, so we lived with my mother together, until she died, unfortunately, half a year ago. It's still painful to talk about it. She was the best. She loved me very much. She always felt sorry for me. My name is Alexander Matveyevna Nikiforova. Maybe you know her? I don't know anything about her. She was a teacher in a kindergarten all her life. The old man was a fool. No, I don't know such a person. I still have a great memory of names and surnames. You see, my wife gave birth to twins. She was told that one child died. We mourned him and buried him. Something doesn't fit. How do we find out everything and solve this mystery of resemblance? Especially since your mom and Dennis are no longer alive, and my wife too. Some kind of deadlock is being drawn. Dennis thought about it, then suddenly called you. Listen, we can turn to the private detective agency. Maybe they can help us find the answer. The old man suddenly choked you. Exactly, stupid old man. No brains at all. I have a good friend. I once saved his life on the operating table. He also gave me his business card. He said, please contact me. I will solve any problem. I don't throw such things away. I wonder if they will come in handy. If he hasn't retired and hasn't retired yet, he will definitely help. A very good investigator. Pavel's Brov. He was so loud and confused at the time. Not that hour. I'll try to call him and make an agreement. So they decided. Then all of a sudden, Dennis asked for a farewell. Can I hold Fedya in my arms? After all, he is not a stranger, but a Leshkin's son. Sveta smiled and nodded her head in agreement. I really like Dennis as a person. Always calm and reasonable, only very shy and silent. He took the baby with a quiver, the one who smiled without a tooth in his mouth, so funny, and screamed, feeling that someone took him as a stranger. Dunidogid, look at you, so small, and you've already made me a face. Just like Oleg in childhood. Well, Moro, just like A. Old friends hugged each other in a friendly way. Pavel called you. Good afternoon, Fyodor Ivanovich. How many years, how many winters? I am very glad to see you. Don't think, I haven't forgotten, thanks to whom my motor is beating. Thank you, then life was saved. I understand that something happened, and now you need help. I will gladly help you, especially since I have been retired for a long time. I have my own search agency. But I can't do without a search. As my wife says, cases are clinical and treatment is not suitable. Fyodor Ivanovich took a portrait of his son and put it on the table. Let's get down to business. Look, this is my late son, Ivan's photo. And this is a completely alien man, Dennis. I met him, we talked. His mother brought him up in the neighboring town. There is nothing in common, but you can see it yourself. The similarity is phenomenal. My wife gave birth to twins at one time, but one of the children died. We buried him, as it should be. Only Vanechka survived. Help me, my friend, to solve the riddle. I'll be very grateful. Pavel shook his hands. But you are like small children, an honest word. The first thing to start with is to pass the samples for genetic examination, you and Dennis. So we will know for sure whether you are relatives or not. And in the meantime, I will try to reinvent the archive of the maternity home and its staff. And that's what I'm going to do. We'll be in touch. Believe me, miracles don't happen. Everything has a logical explanation. I will do my best to help you. Fyodor Ivanovich, don't doubt it. The old man called Dennis and suggested doing a genetic test. He was very surprised, but agreed. Of course, I think that we can't be relatives, but the mystery of similarity with your son, to be honest, doesn't give me peace. So let's solve all the doubts. I don't mind. I've checked all the old papers, documents, no documents, or other evidence that I'm not my mother's son. I didn't find anything, but it doesn't happen either. I've looked at all the photos of my mother, my late grandmother and grandfather. I don't look like them much. Okay, let's see what the experts will say. When the results came, everyone was shocked. It turned out that Fyodor Ivanovich and Dennis were relatives of father and son. It was just incredible, and everything became even more confusing and incomprehensible. How did it happen? Who was Fyodor Ivanovich burying instead of his dead son? What the hell? So many years to have a family son and not know about it. 3 weeks later, Pavel called and invited everyone to his agency. Dennis went too. He just got burned from curiosity and wanted to know the truth, whatever it was. The investigator dismissed everyone and began his report. I found out everything, guys. I won't say it was easy, since I thought it was more than strange, because if a person has nothing to hide, why is he so nervous? Then I found a nurse, fortunately still alive and well, although very old. So she hinted to me that on that night, there was a change of heart. The nurse accidentally heard a break in the conversation, but also did not tell anything else, was afraid. Then I pressed the button. There are their methods. She realized everything. It turns out that Klimova, Ekaterina Semenovna, and your mother Dennis were best friends. That is why your mother went to give birth to them in this maternity home. They are as it should be. At first, everything was going well, despite the heavy birth and year-old age of the woman. The baby still appeared in the light, although with a weak heart. But a few hours later, misfortune happened. During the planned bypass of the adaptation room, Ekaterina Semenovna noticed the breathless body of the baby. It was just her newborn girlfriend. Your mom, Dennis, started crying and begging for help, because doctors at her critical age and in good health were warned at once. She will never be able to have children again. That day, next to her, your wife Fyodor Ivanovich gave birth to 2 healthy boys. The midwife initially refused, but did not agree. She realized that this was a criminal offense, and if anything, she would go to prison for a long time. But the friend cried so much, and she was given huge money for that time. The friend's heart was shaking. Her mother was very ill at that time. She urgently needed money. The situation turned out to be surprisingly successful for you, Fyodor Ivanovich, were given a dead child, and your son, the twin, alive and healthy, was given to a stranger woman. All the records were made as if one of the twins had died. At that time, the time was different. No one knew that there was an examination. You were killed in grief and did not dig into the truth. Although, by the hot tracks, it was probably possible to quickly untangle this case. After all, Vanya survived, which means that life goes on. Your mother, Dennis, can be understood in a human way. She was desperate and clung to any straw. But I can't justify such a mess that went to such a crime. How can you manage other people's lives? Who gave her such a right to break other people's lives and destinies? Even my hair on my head was shaking when I heard all this. Some kind of wildness. Well, anything can happen, but you can adopt a child. How many poor people are being taken care of in the shelter? Why steal someone else's child? And it's okay if some unfaithful was a virgin and she doesn't need children. But knowing that long-awaited children your wife Fyodor Ivanovich will do such a scoundrel, it's incredible. Dennis was in complete shock. Thousands of thoughts were confused in his head. It turns out that he lived all this time as a stranger, not his own life. Someone else rewritten his fate in the maternity hospital, and he was raised by a completely stranger. And he truly loved her and called her mom, but he could have lived a completely different life. With his own brother, a blacksmith, with modest parents who were quite normal people. He looked at Fyodor Ivanovich in a completely different way. He looked at every single line of his face and looked for similar features, and found them. The guy suddenly thought, oh my God, if not for Sveta, he would have lived on thinking that he no longer had any relatives on this land. And it turns out that they live in the same city with their father, walk on the same streets, and do not know about each other at all. In a rush of emotions, he approached the old man and hugged him warmly and sincerely for the first time. Well, hello, Dad. I'm glad we found each other. We have a lot to talk about and a lot to talk about in relationships. But I know the main thing. We are together now, and I won't leave you no matter what. Fyodor Ivanovich even cried before that he was worried. Suddenly, a strong headache flashed in the eyes, and he lost consciousness, crumbling like a cat right on the floor. Pavel and Dennis were very scared, called an ambulance, and began to try to bring the old man to his senses, sprinkling cold water on him. Finally, Fyodor Ivanovich began to come to his senses. He felt a little better. Dennis began to ask him, "What's wrong with you, Dad? You often feel so bad." The old man sighed and confessed, "But to be honest, half a year ago, I found an aneurysm of the brain vessels. I couldn't understand it all, but why my head hurts so much. No pills help. My vision began to fall. It was double in my eyes. I often felt sick. And when I found out my diagnosis, I waved my hand. Only surgery can help. Otherwise, this tumor will burst soon, blood flow into the brain, and death will occur. Surgery costs crazy money. I have never had and will never have such. And who needs me? The sooner I die, the faster I will meet with Lena and Vanechka in that world. But the attacks have become more and more frequent, especially if I get too nervous. I hope I won't have to suffer for long." Dennis ran up to the old man and hugged him. "What are you talking about, Dad? I need you. I need you, Sveta. I just found my father. You say you won't have to suffer for long. I'll find out everything, take you to the doctor, and we'll cure you. I want you to get a surgery and get better. For my sake. You hear me?" The same day, Dennis went for a walk with Sveta and the child in the park and began to tell her about everything. "Did you know that Fyodor Ivanovich is immortal? Why didn't you tell me anything? It turns out that he needs an urgent, expensive operation. He fainted today, right in the office of a private detective. Can you imagine? And he is also my father." Sveta was shocked to hear. Actually, he often drinks some pills and complains of a headache. As long as I didn't ask him, he kept silent. Apparently, he didn't want to upset me. We have to help him. There's no one else to help. He's a wonderful person. Me and my son are not obliged to live this saintly man. Now I understand why Fedor decided to rent me his apartment. What to do, Dennis? Maybe we should take the loan? Maybe we could try to sell my poor room. But they won't give me much for it, of course. And I have nothing else." The guy thought it over and then replied, "I'll sell the car. That should be enough. I'll do it right tomorrow. Why would I need this pile of iron if I'm going to ruin the life of my own man? And you, while you're looking for a clinic and a good surgeon, the time is expensive. You can't be late. I've just found my own father, and I can't let anything happen to him." Young people actively took up the case, and 3 weeks later everything was ready. And Fedor Ivanovich was put in the department for surgery. Everyone was very worried. Dennis and Sveta were in turn on duty in the hospital and sat with Fedya, the younger one. During this time, the guy was so attached to the baby that he was so attached to her soul. He learned to swim and feed him, to go to the battle and to play. Fedya always smiled at him and very rarely choked. Dennis often caught himself thinking that he no longer imagined his life without Sveta, Fedya, and Dad. After all, what did he have before that? Work, friends, and loneliness in an empty rented apartment. There were, of course, girls. The guy was cute, but as long as Dennis didn't try to start serious relationships, everything didn't work out. Something didn't work out. He didn't yell inside that everything was mine for life. He wasn't interested in short intrigues. He wanted long and solid relationships. But he came across all kinds of girls. You buy an expensive gift, you take it to a cafe, it's yours. If it's just tea in the kitchen, then sorry, goodbye. Now he often saw how this simple, unnoticeable woman cooked a meal, nosed it on a baby, and looked at her involuntarily. For some reason, the heart was beating very often, wanted to hug her, touch her, kiss her. But he always twitched. Don't laugh. She is almost your best friend's wife. What will it look like if we get close to her? Will she be offended or not understand? Sveta often thought about Dennis, compared him to Oleg, listened to her. They were completely different. Oleg was so emotional, open. All his emotions were written on his face. And Dennis was silent, thinking about something and looking at her strangely. But why does he pull so much to him like a magnet? She was even a little ashamed. It seemed that she was betraying the memory of her fiancé, thinking constantly about another man. But the more Sveta tried to escape from her feelings, hide them away, into the farthest corner of her soul, the stronger she felt that she needed Dennis like air. Without him, everything is gray, and it is so easy and calm with him. The operation was difficult. It was not clear how it would go on. Fyodor Ivanovich unexpectedly fell into a coma and was between life and death. Doctors honestly admitted that the chances of recovery were too. But Dennis and Sveta believed that he would recover, and every day they would wait in line at his bed. They talked to him, Red talked about how they loved him. 3 weeks passed, and the man had never come to his senses. Then Sveta took a risk, and deceiving the medical staff, she waited for the moment when there was no one in the emergency room. She came to the old man's room with her son. "Be quiet, we're going to save Grandpa." And he seemed to understand. He didn't make any sound, only sang to himself. The woman went into the room, sat down on the chair, and began to talk. "Hello, Fyodor Ivanovich. We miss you very much, Fedya especially. Get better soon. We feel so bad without you. You are like a father to me. Deniska got all the wrong. They say I read that there is a connection between the man who took the birth and the baby. Let's check it out." She carefully put the baby next to Fyodor Ivanovich. "You took Fedya first, gave her life. Listen, what song we sing for you at home with our son. And we pray that you get well soon." And she quietly sang the lullaby. And the baby sang along with the lullaby. And at the end he said something like the word grandfather. Sveta screamed, "Wow, Fedya called you grandfather. Do you hear? He loves you too. Wake up, please. You must live." And then the old man's eyelids drooped, and he began to try to move his fingers on his hand. All the indicators on the monitor were squeaking and blinking. Sveta grabbed the baby, jumped out of the room, and ran to the post nurse. "I think Fyodor Ivanovich is coming to his senses." She was terrified and whispered to her, "Who allowed you to come there with your servants? I was fired because of you. To hell with you. You went completely crazy. Go out to the corridor immediately." Fyodor Ivanovich was all this time as if in some kind of hazy, viscous fog. He could not understand where he should go, to that light or that one. After all, it seems to be very close there. Here, shake his hand is Lenachka and Vanechka. And on the ground, Dennis is worried about him and is waiting for Sveta with his grandson. He heard perfectly how they called him, how they asked him to come back. And he wanted to answer them, but for some reason the body was as if not his. He did not listen to anything. He tried to wake up, but his eyes did not open. And only when he heard about Gukin and Fedya, the very baby to whom he helped to be born, he knew the answer. He must come back to them. Who will help them? It's so great when you will be called Grandpa. And he will definitely come back with his kneecap when his time comes. At this very moment, Fyodor Ivanovich was very tense and tried to open the seemingly unsteady eyelids again. Oh my God! He did it! At first, all the silhouettes were blurred, but then the image became clearer. "I love you too." Sveta was crying in the hallway and called Dennis at work. "Dennis, my dear, your dad is awake. We came up with everything right." When he heard the baby crying, he immediately began to come to himself. Come faster. The guy immediately left work and rushed to the hospital. He prayed the whole way in the bus so that his father would recover. He recovered and quickly returned home. When Dennis entered the ward, he saw that Fyodor Ivanovich was no longer connected to the life support system. And around him, there is a whole delegation of doctors, and they check the reactions. He rushed to his father, unable to cope with the feelings, and kissed him. "Daddy, darling, you woke up? What happiness! Now everything will be fine for sure. We feel so bad without you. Get better quickly." Fyodor Ivanovich's soul became so warm and good. Probably for the first time after the tragic death of his wife, Ivan wanted to live with terrible strength again. He was ready to fight the hateful illness and knew he would get better. Now there is a meaning in life. He was needed by someone. The pensioner was insanely grateful that night the light called his apartment. From that moment on, the fate of Fyodor Ivanovich changed dramatically. Everything turned upside down, and life again played, as before with colors. At first, Sveta and the baby appeared in his life, and then his own son was found. The old man suddenly remembered that very dream when Lena told him in a dream, "You have someone to live for, but you don't know about it yet." But it happened. It turns out she knew that it would be so and wanted to save him from trouble, not to let him roll into the abyss and disappear. The old man quietly said, "Thank you, son, for everything. I know that you sold a good car to pay for the operation, and Sveta cared so much about me. You're all now a big family for me. You know what, son? And move over to me too. Just everyone in the room, and I will be happy that you are next to me. What do you say? Denis Miled." "Thank you, Dad. I'm only 4. You know, I've been so attached to the baby and Sveta for this time that I can't imagine life without them. And I really like her. Probably I'm even in love with her. I'm just afraid to say that. She is the bride of my late friend Oleg, and I feel awkward in front of him, even though he is not alive." The man became serious and advised, "I'll tell you this, son. You can't raise Oleg. You can't live in the past. I was holding on to him for a long time, too. I suffered and suffered. I drank and almost rolled down the abyss. Listen to yourself and your heart. It's better to confess to Sveta and get rejected than to worry about what may or may not happen. I think she likes you too. Her eyes are burning. Only she, like you, is chasing these feelings away. Afraid to forget about Oleg. Just tell her everything you feel, then you will definitely learn the truth. In any case, it will be easier for you." Dennis hugged the old man. "Thanks for the advice, Dad. How great it is that we can now talk like this about souls like men. You know, I repeat my father's words every time and smear him. After all, I dreamed about my father all my childhood, and I miss him so much. But I want you to know that I don't blame my mother for anything, no matter what. What she did was, of course, terrible, no doubt. But she loved me completely sincerely. I felt it and always knew. She tried to tell me something before she died, but she didn't have time. I only understood the phrase, 'Son, I'm so guilty of you. Forgive me.' But I thought she was just wandering in the heat and didn't give them any meaning. Apparently, she wanted to repent, but she left for heaven earlier." Since that day, Fyodor Ivanovich quickly began to make a correction, and 2 weeks later, he was brought home. When he entered the apartment, he immediately noticed changes. The light was just flashing, and her eyes were glowing and lit with true happiness. She even changed her appearance and transformed. She did a fashionable haircut, put her hair in a different way. The blush was on his cheeks. The table just broke from the treat. Fyodor Ivanovich was put down as the head of the family in the center and began to be fed with delicacies. Sveta and Denis were secretly looking over the matter, but tried to maintain the visibility that they were just friends. It turned out, let's say, not very well. Then Fyodor Ivanovich couldn't stand it, laughed, and said, "Well, we are like small children. Yes, I understand that you are now together. Why are you hiding? I am very happy about this. Now we are one big friendly family. There is no more reward for the old man. I advise you to love. You are both worthy of this." "Yes, grandson. Is it right, Grandpa says? Oh, now I would take Masha to you in my health. But you can't. I promised Lena. Therefore, pour peach juice with a branch." And Fedenka happily began to smile like a little son. It was so easy and good for everyone in the soul. They approached each other perfectly, as if they lived together for many years. Let them make it all work out fine because they deserve it.